I'm Elias Hawthorne. I'm 39, and for the past 20 years, I've made a career out of fixing companies that are on the brink. When a business is losing money, bleeding talent, and staring down bankruptcy, that's when my phone rings. I live in Boston, and honestly, I've saved more companies than I can remember. The job isn't pretty. It's late-night spreadsheets, 6 a.m. calls, and high-stakes meetings where a single word can change the fate of billions. But I'm damn good at it. Early in 2023, the Vidian Group reached out. They used to be a big name in data analytics. Now they were drowning. Clients fleeing, debts piling up, and at the helm was Elias Hawthorne, a 65-year-old founder stuck in the past, more worried about his own legacy than the company's future. Elias built Vidian from scratch back in the 90s. He wore that story like a shield. Problem was, the world moved on. The competition got sharper, faster. Elias? He ran Vidian like it was still 1998. The board and outside investors brought me in as VP of strategy. Not Elias. He fought it the whole way, but the investors pushed hard. Fix it or we're out. Eventually he caved. Suddenly I was his problem. His expensive, necessary problem. My job was simple, save Vidian from going under. So I did. For 7 months I barely slept. I overhauled what we sold, tightened operations, cut costs without gutting the team. And most importantly, I called in every favor I had in government. The Department of Health was looking for a data partner to handle national health records. Huge deal, $50 million over 3 years. The kind of thing that could bring a company back from the dead. I spent weeks on the proposal, flew to DC 4 times, sat in windowless rooms with bureaucrats who asked the same questions over and over, hammered out terms, tweaked numbers, pushed timelines. Every piece of it I handled myself. And in October 2023, we landed it. 50 million locked down. The stock doubled in 3 weeks. The board went wild. Investors who were ready to run started talking growth. Vidian was back. Elias did his victory lap, grinning for the cameras, talking about vision and leadership, calling it a return to our roots. My name never came up. If you like stories with a sting, revenge, backstabbing, all that, hit like and subscribe. There's a new one every day, each wilder than the last. 2 weeks after we sealed the deal, I was at home, reviewing numbers, when my phone buzzed. Text from Elias. Your mission has been completed. We are terminating your collaboration effective immediately. Good luck with your next steps. That was it. No call, no meeting, no severance talk, no board presentation. Just a text. I stared at it for a while. Not because I was surprised, but because I'd seen it coming. Maybe not the exact day, but I knew it was inevitable. Elias is territorial. My success made him nervous. The board liked me. Investors liked me. The staff respected me. That made him uncomfortable. So he did what insecure leaders do. He got rid of the threat. Within hours, I was locked out of everything. Email gone, badge dead, access revoked. Elias didn't waste a second, and he controlled the story. To shareholders, he blamed strategic differences. To the press, he said the company needed to regain internal control. He painted me as the hired gun who finished the job and moved on. The truth? He fired me before my performance bonus vested. That bonus, the one tied to the 50 million contract, was worth 7 figures. He cut me out before I could touch a dime. But here's the thing. I don't just fix companies. I read people. I see the angles and I plan ahead. Elias had no clue that while I was saving Vidian, I was building something else, something he wouldn't spot until it was way too late. I noticed the signs early, 2nd month in, really. Meetings postponed for no reason, decisions made without me. My ideas ignored in boardrooms, only to show up later with someone else's name attached. Elias was the textbook insecure executive. He always needed to be the smartest guy in the room, but if anyone threatened that image, he didn't compete. He sabotaged. So I started documenting everything. Every email, every proposal, every contract. I kept copies of all my correspondence with clients, notes from meetings, and time-stamped records of my work. I wasn't building a case for court or anything. I was just protecting myself because in corporate America, documentation is power, and I planned to stack as much of it as I could. But that wasn't my only play. While I was out front, supposedly focused on saving Vidian, I had something else going on behind the scenes. Using my own money and the network I'd built over 20 years, I set up a holding company, Hawthorne Equity Partners, registered in Delaware for privacy, built for one reason, acquisition. Through Hawthorne, I started buying up Pioneer data shares. Pioneer was Vidian's biggest rival. They had the tech, the R&D muscle, but they had one fatal flaw: debt. Their leadership had bet big on expansion, and it blew up in their faces. By 2023, they were in trouble. I started small, picking up distressed debt at auction and converting that into equity. I used intermediaries, shell companies, and private deals. Nothing shady, just patience and strategy. By the time Wallace fired me in late October 2023, I owned 42% of Pioneer. Nobody at Vidian had a clue. Nobody at Pioneer knew who I was either, because everything was done through the holding company. So I became a ghost shareholder. Majority power, zero profile, and I was ready to act. The week after Wallace axed me, I called an emergency meeting with Pioneer's board. I revealed my stake and who I was. Then I laid out a full turnaround plan, using everything I'd learned at Vidian, all the contacts I'd made. And I made my pitch, a hostile takeover of Vidian. The room went dead quiet. Patricia Reeves, a board member who'd been at Pioneer for 15 years, broke the silence. "You want us to buy the company that just fired you?" she asked. "No," I told her. "I want us to buy the company I just saved." Big difference. Then I showed my math. Vidian's stock had jumped thanks to a $50 million federal contract, but underneath they were still shaky. Operational messes everywhere. Legacy debt Wallace refused to touch. A bloated change-averse management team. Meanwhile, Pioneer had the tech and the people, but not the contracts. If we put the two together, we'd have a juggernaut. And because Vidian's surge was based on a single contract, not real growth, we could buy them for a good price. The board was skeptical, but I could see I had their attention. The next 3 days, I barely slept. Just constant meetings, running financials, risk reports, merger plans. I brought in outside analysts and locked down financing from private equity firms I'd worked with before. Slowly, the board shifted. By mid-November 2023, they voted to go for it. We announced the hostile takeover on a Tuesday morning. Hawthorne Equity Partners, working with Pioneer Data, made a formal offer to buy all outstanding Vidian shares at a 15% premium. The offer went straight to shareholders, not management. In corporate battles, that's what you do. You go around the king and talk to the people who actually own the castle. Wallace's response? Exactly what I expected. He called an emergency board meeting. Hired a pricey Boston law firm. Sent out a press release calling the takeover a personal vendetta in disguise. Claimed I didn't have the resources. Said shareholders would never go for it. He was wrong on every count. The spite thing was actually funny considering he fired me by text. But the real problem was, he just didn't get it. I wasn't coming for Vidian out of revenge. I was trying to save it, again. And this time, nobody could kick me out over a text message. Within 2 days of our announcement, 2 of Vidian's biggest institutional shareholders called me directly. They were sick of Wallace, sick of watching him take credit for my work, and they saw the logic in the merger. Richard Oakes, a hedge fund manager, didn't mince words when I spoke to him. "Wallace is a dinosaur," he said. "This company needs new blood, and honestly, it needed it 5 years ago." The shareholder support gave us momentum. Wallace tried to fight back. He pitched a poison pill strategy to the board, hoping to dilute the shares and make any buyout too expensive to bother with. But the board, under pressure from investors and tempted by the financial upside, shot him down. Wallace went searching for a white knight, some big company to swoop in with a counteroffer and keep him in the CEO chair. No one bit. Everybody knew Vidian's value rode on a contract I'd landed. As the days dragged on, Wallace started to look desperate. He called mutual contacts hoping to dig up dirt on me, anything he could use to tank the deal. He came up empty. There was nothing to find. So he tried another angle and leaked stories to the press, claiming I was tough to work with and had caused rifts inside Vidian. But the people who'd actually worked with me spoke up. They told reporters I'd been fair, professional, and effective, and that Wallace was out of line. Anonymous sources backed me up. But the stock price told the real story. Within 2 weeks of our announcement, Vidian shares jumped another 8%. The market was all in on the merger. Shareholders didn't care about Wallace. They cared about their returns. And the numbers didn't lie. Pioneer Data plus Vidian Group under new leadership was worth a lot more than Vidian with Wallace in charge. 30 days after the announcement, the tender offer closed. We had commitments from 68% of Vidian shareholders. The merger was happening. Wallace lost, but he wasn't ready to give up. He made one last desperate move, A lawsuit claiming I'd breached my fiduciary duty by secretly setting up a competitor for acquisition while I was still at Vidian. His lawyers argued I'd worked against the company's interests. My legal team tore those claims apart in a single hearing. I'd never used Vidian resources for Pioneer, never shared company secrets, never done anything to hurt Vidian's business. The $50 million contract I secured had actually made the company stronger. The judge tossed the case, calling Wallace's claims more retaliatory than real. The press picked it up. Wallace came off as petty. I looked like the professional he'd tried to push out. The final board vote happened on a Thursday afternoon, late December 2023. The Vidian board, feeling shareholder heat and seeing the writing on the wall, voted to accept the merger. Pioneer Data would acquire Vidian Group. The new company would get a new name and structure, and Wallace Thorne would be out as CEO, immediately. I wasn't there for the vote. Patricia Reeves from Pioneer called me right after. "It's done," she said. The board accepted. Wallace is out. They're drafting the press release now. I asked how he took it. She told me he didn't say a word. He just stood up, walked out of the conference room, didn't even look at anyone. That image stuck with me. Wallace Thorne, who built Vidian from scratch, who fired me with a text, walking out of his own boardroom in silence. No goodbye speech, no final words, just a quiet exit from the company he couldn't control anymore. The official announcement landed the next morning. Pioneer Data and Vidian Group were merging to form Verdant Data Systems. The press release hit all the usual notes: synergy, market positioning, growth potential. Wallace got a single line. Founding CEO Wallace Thorne will be stepping down to pursue other opportunities. Translation: he got fired. A week later, in early January 2024, they unveiled the new structure. I was named chairman of the board and chief strategy officer of Verdant Data Systems. Patricia became CEO. We kept the best people from both companies and let the redundancies go. Wallace's inner circle, the folks who helped him mess with my bonus and twist the story about the federal contract, got severance and a push out the door. We didn't make it personal, just business. But the message was clear. The old regime was finished. The integration took months. We merged operations, combined our tech, renegotiated vendor deals. That $50 million federal contract I'd won, we expanded it. The Department of Health liked what they saw in the merger and bumped the deal up by another $20 million over 2 years. We also picked up contracts with 3 more federal agencies and 5 major hospital networks. The business I'd rescued was thriving now, running smoother than ever under new leadership. Wallace, he vanished. No new CEO gigs, no board seats, not even an interview. For someone who'd spent years building up his image, the silence was almost loud. I heard through a friend he'd settled in Florida, Naples to be exact, living out his days golfing, his retirement fully funded by the stock options he cashed out before the merger. He left with plenty of money, but honestly, that's about all he had left. His company, his reputation, his legacy, gone. I never reached out. Didn't text, didn't call, didn't gloat. Why bother? The outcome said everything. He tried to erase me with a text, and I wiped out his entire career with one well-timed acquisition. The difference? My move was above board, legal, ethical, and good for everyone except him. His? Pure spite, and in the end, he only hurt himself. Mid-2024, Verdant Data Systems went public. The IPO pulled in $300 million. Our stock price tripled within 6 months. By early 2025, we'd become one of the top 5 data analytics companies in the country. Over 2,000 employees, more than $500 million in annual revenue. Between my Pioneer Holdings shares and the equity I got from the merger, my stake was worth north of $80 million. Not bad for a guy who got fired by text. But honestly, the money was never the point. What mattered was proving that real strategy and patience beat ego and short-term thinking every time. Wallace had decades of experience, sure, but he stopped learning. He stopped adapting. He built something great, then spent years defending it instead of growing it. When someone showed up who could help, he saw a threat instead of an ally. Still, I learned something from him. Insecurity can ruin you, no matter how high you climb. It'll turn you against your friends, push away your supporters, and eventually, you'll set up your own downfall. Wallace didn't lose because I was smarter or tougher. He lost because he was scared. Scared to be overshadowed, scared to lose control, scared to admit he needed help. That fear made him weak. The old Vidian headquarters, the place I spent those crazy 7 months, sold in early 2025. Somebody turned it into luxury condos. Our new Verdant Data Systems HQ, we built it 2 blocks over, a gleaming glass building with twice the space and 3 times the tech. From our top floor, you can see the old place if you look. Sometimes I catch a glimpse while walking through the executive suite. I don't stop or stare. It's just a building now, a reminder of where I started and how far you can go when you keep your head and trust the process. One moment stands out from all this. Spring 2025, I got invited to speak at a business leadership conference in Chicago. One of those big events, keynotes, panels, networking that goes late into the night. They wanted me to talk about corporate turnarounds and strategic acquisitions. I said yes. The auditorium was packed, about 800 people, execs, investors, business students. I spent 40 minutes on what I'd learned: strategic restructuring, the power of documentation, the need to stay calm when things go sideways. I never said Wallace's name. Didn't have to. Everyone knew the story. It ran in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Bloomberg. I was the exec who got fired by text and came back to buy the company. During Q&A, someone asked, "Do you consider what you did revenge?" I paused, thought about it, and said, "No, revenge is about spite. What I did was strategic repositioning. I saw a way to create value, so I went for it. Fixing an injustice was just a side effect, not the main goal." Diplomatic and partly true. If I'm being totally honest, yeah. There was satisfaction, not the petty kind, not wanting to see someone suffer, but the kind that comes from proving merit actually matters. Wallace thought he could erase me and rewrite the story. He was wrong. The market proved it, loud and clear. After my talk, a bunch of people came up with their own stories. Turns out I wasn't alone. People reached out after I was fired, folks who'd been burned themselves, pushed out of companies they helped build, or cheated out of what they'd earned. They wanted to know my secret. How did I keep my cool? How did I plan so carefully and pull off the turnaround? I told them straight, there's no secret sauce. Just 3 rules. First, don't burn bridges no matter how badly someone torches you at work. Second, document everything. Always. Third, stay 3 steps ahead. Wallace was playing checkers. I played chess. After that conference, I heard from David Ortiz, a former Vidian employee. He'd been a senior analyst on my team during those 7 messy months in 2023. He told me something I hadn't heard before. After they fired me, Wallace called a company-wide meeting and spun a neat little story. Said I'd left on my own to pursue other opportunities. Painted it as mutual, all smiles. But people weren't fooled. They saw how fast it happened, how my access vanished overnight, how my name disappeared from everything. David said morale nosedived after I left. If someone who just saved the company could get tossed aside that easily, nobody felt safe. A lot of us hoped you'd land on your feet, David told me. But none of us thought you'd land on top of him. David joined Verdant Data Systems a couple months after the merger closed in early 2024. Now he's a director of analytics. Leading a team of 20, he's one of dozens of former Vidian people who made the jump. We kept the good ones, the people who cared about the work, not just the politics. We built something better than what Wallace ever had, because we built on skill, not ego. I never chased that 7-figure bonus Wallace stole from me. I could have. My lawyer said I had a solid case, but I let it go. Not because I didn't deserve it, I absolutely did. But fighting for it would have kept me chained to the past, and I had bigger plans. My stake in Verdant was worth more than any bonus anyway. Wallace tried to take 7 figures from me. I took 8 from his legacy. That's math I can live with. Then, in summer 2025, out of nowhere, I get an email from a Gmail address I don't recognize. The signature catches my eye. Wallace Thorne. The message is short. He wrote, "I saw the news about Verdant's latest contract with the Department of Defense. Congratulations. You've built something impressive. I made a mistake in how I handled your departure. I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I recognize that now." I read it 3 times. It wasn't really an apology, more like an admission. And coming from Wallace, a guy who built his whole persona around never showing weakness, it might be as close to regret as he gets. I thought about replying. Even drafted something polite and professional. But I deleted it. Some things don't need an answer. Some chapters stay closed. What did I learn from all of this? Not revenge, not justice. It's about playing the long game. In business and in life, short-term thinking ruins more value than any competitor ever could. Wallace got so wrapped up in his ego he missed the big picture. He saw me as a threat instead of an ally. That mistake cost him everything. Midnight, dig through spreadsheets till dawn. But now it's for something I built, not something I was hired to rescue. Wallace tried to erase me with a text. In the end, he erased himself from the industry. And the irony? He did it to himself. I just gave him the opening. All I did was keep my head, think a few moves ahead, and execute. The rest was bound to happen. People sometimes ask if I feel guilty about Wallace. Honestly, no, I didn't wreck his career. He did that himself by letting fear call the shots instead of logic. I just took advantage of the opening. That's not cruelty. That's business. Around here, the line between winning and losing comes down to who spots the chance first and who's willing to go for it. I don't think about Wallace much anymore. He's retired in Florida. I'm building the future up in Boston. I doubt our paths will cross again, but honestly, even if they did, I wouldn't have anything left to say. Everything important already happened, not through arguments, but through what we did. No empty threats, just outcomes. He fired me over a text message. I responded by pulling off a merger. In the end, it wasn't about what either of us said. The market spoke for us. And let's be real, competence always wins out over ego. If you liked this story, go ahead and like the video and drop a comment to tell me what you thought. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.